Welcome to the Human Performance Outliers podcast with your hosts, Dr. Shawn Baker and Zach Bitter. At Human Performance Outliers podcast, we dive into a wide range of topics revolving around health, nutrition, and physical fitness. If you enjoy the show and wish to support us, please visit patreon.com/HPO podcast. If you do not use Patreon but still wish to support us, please also consider checking out our PayPal page at paypal.me/HPO pod. The link to both of those can also be found in the show notes. Finally, please consider subscribing to us on your favorite podcast listening platform. Now, on to the next topic.
Oh, yeah.
Zach, are we recording now?
Yeah, I just put it up, so we're good to go.
Yeah, so Brian and I and a bunch of we had about 50 people show up to that little meeting last night where we all hung out and ate a bunch of free burgers and shot the breeze, I guess. And, it was a good time.
Yeah, man. Yeah, Chris Bell and I guess William Schofelt put that on, and you were part of it.
Yeah, we done that. That's the second one we did. We did a similar one in Newport Beach not long ago. So we're gonna try to do that, pretty regularly. At least once every other month, or maybe once a month if we can kind of get everybody organized. But it was, like I said, we put it out there, and we had 50 people sign up within 2 days, and more people wanted to. And we're like, we had to cut it off at 50 because we were getting all that food. All the food was free, provided for us.
Yeah.
So, nice thing. So
there's a Hop Dotty right by my house. I'll have to do a Phoenix chapter of that when you guys get big enough.
Yeah, maybe. Well, we could probably do. I'd ask Hop Dotty if they want to start sponsoring our show. They may be.
Yeah.
I'll talk to my man Matt Schweitzer about that. See if he'd be into it. But anyway, Brian, it's a pleasure having you on. For you guys that don't know, Brian is I guess your background was engineering. Is that right, Brian?
Yeah, mechanical engineering. I'm in the club like Ivor Cummins and Dave Feldman and Nyman.
Guys that all have their brains wired to think a certain way. And so now you're a mechanical engineer, recent filmmaker, and you're producing a movie called Food Lies, which I guess you've been doing that for a little over a year now, if I'm not mistaken. And
yeah, well, I grabbed you. You were actually the first interview. That was a year ago.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah,
11 somewhere. You came in for Rogan.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I remember that. So, so tell us a little bit about yourself, Brian, just for those people that know, real quick. And then I know you got that Peak Human podcast, which is excellent for other people that want another podcast to listen to. But tell us a little bit what's going on with you, and let's get into maybe some of this film stuff and some of the other stuff. One of the things that I have found, and you may have seen the same thing, as you start down this rabbit hole of looking at nutrition, and you think there's a few things you like to pursue, then you uncover all this other stuff, and it almost pisses you off. And I think it's one of those things where you're just like, okay, my eyes have been opened, and I don't know if you had the same experience I have, and I know a lot of other people have. So anyway, let's get into your background, and then we'll go from there.
Sure thing. Yeah, definitely. There was a process, and I started with film like growing up. So I was always with film, but did mechanical engineering, and then I got into tech, and then back into film. So it was kind of a full circle thing. But I think it really did help me get that, doing the engineering and doing all this other stuff prepared me to know the scientific method and critical thinking and how to look at all sides of this. So that was huge for me. And my story with the film is my parents had health problems. So we were eating the right things, we thought. We weren't eating fast food. We were just eating sort of the food pyramid type of thing, low fat products, and it just caught up with them eventually. And you do fine when you're younger. A lot of people come at me like, hey, I eat grains and whatever all the time and I'm fine. It's like, okay, well, check in when you're 50. So that's kind of what happened to them. And I think that their diet contributed to their disease, which not a lot of people know about in the general public, that cancer and Alzheimer's have a big metabolic component. I mean, people listening and you guys know that there's tons of research around this, but a lot of people think, oh, that's just genetic, or that's just from, we don't know anything about cancer. So I really think it has that dietary component. So that got me started on my health journey. And over the past 4 years, I've been changing the way I eat and learned a lot. And I quit my job. Actually, I was doing some tech stuff and just went off on my own. And about a year and a half ago, I saw What the Health. And that, that just hurt me so much. I was like, this film is just so bad in every way. And it's just kind of tricking the people who just don't know any better. And I need to make the opposite film, right? I need to give people the real story. And that's when I set off on this journey and, started getting you involved. But yeah, along the way, so many things changed, opened my eyes to the bigger story and what was going on. And also, there's also some people go too far and they think it's this crazy conspiracy theory. And they're like, oh, the government's out to get us, to make us weak, or, this veganism is trying to like kill off the population. People get really crazy. But what I found is that it's just a lot of large interests at play, and they're just trying to make money. And it's not a crazy conspiracy unless you think, well, you can consider people just making money that's a conspiracy, is these food companies and, all these other people they're after money, and they kind of got the green light with our bad science in the 1950s through the 70s to the guidelines in the 80s. And it kind of just opened the door for this all to happen, right? It was just sort of this bad accident.
Like with a lot of things, follow the almighty dollar, and you usually find the answer at the end somewhere. So it makes sense. And
yeah,
Brian, one of the reasons I was excited to kind of have you on the show too is because you kind of went on this journey with an eye to kind of find out, well, what is ideal human nutrition, and what is like, where are the holes in some of these arguments, and what can we actually glean from some of this stuff. And you've talked to a lot of the folks we have on our podcast, as well as many others, and you've more or less come to the consensus that you think meat should be a staple in our diet. What were some of the big aha moments along that process that kind of brought you to that?
Yeah, so the film is kind of, we're looking at the past 50 years, like what went wrong, right? That's part of the story, is how did we end up with this terrible situation with so much of America fat and sick? And part of the film, a lot of them was exploring what we should eat, right? Let's look at all the evidence. And I try to be unbiased. I know I love meat. I've instinctively knew that I should be eating meat at every meal since I was about 9 years old. I just thought it wasn't a meal without meat. So I had my bias going in, but I think that's not even a bias, because that's just a foundation of human nutrition, right? Mm-hmm. So I went on this journey and looked at all sides, and the film, let's look at all the lines of evidence. Let's look at evolution. Let's look at modern science, biochemistry. Let's look at randomized controlled trials. Let's look at epidemiology. Let's look at clinical evidence and anecdotes and modern hunter-gatherers, anything we can, and everything lines up so that comes to a conclusion that there's a framework that we should all be eating by. And there's no holes in that framework. But when you look at the other side, the vegan side, or the more plant-based side, there's tons of holes in their theories, right, that they have to ignore. So that they have this way of just putting their head in the sand and ignoring big chunks of evidence to fit their story. But when you look at it from the other perspective, there are no holes, right? And everything lines up perfectly. So that's kind of the film comes to a conclusion that there's a framework which we should be eating by. And there's many things that fit in that framework. Carnivore fits in that framework. Keto fits in that framework. Even pescatarian could fit in this framework, right? If you're including fish and eggs and cheese and, dairy into your diet with, some other plant foods, that's fine. It's really about nutrient density, right? So the common theme is nutrient density is the most important thing. And to me, that means bioavailable, essential amino acids, fatty acids, vitamins, and minerals. Okay, so that basically means a lot of animal foods, right? Because those are the most bioavailable.
Yeah, and when you look at just what food groups are the most nutrient dense with the bioavailability caveat there, you look at the top 10 list, and 4 of them are some form of meat or or animal-based product. Yeah. So, being that humans are omnivores, it's to eliminate half that list based on, whatever reason you choose, seems like you're going to be making a compromise in health for the most part.
It doesn't really make sense to me. I I put out a post on social media, why are our fallback foods being purported as the healthiest way to eat nowadays, right? It's like these plant-based foods is what we had to survive on when we couldn't get a hunt for all of history. These are our fallback foods. Why? Well, and now this whole anti-meat agenda, whatever it is, vegan, big food companies, they're trying to make us think that these are what we should be eating. It's so confusing.
Yeah, Brian, just back to your point on the conspiracy theory stuff like that, and I certainly see that all the time. I get people talking about this UN Agenda 21 and this sort of thing about, and I have no doubt that there are probably some people out there that is their goal. I don't think it's a global, worldwide campaign. I think more like you do, that it's mostly about money, and I think that's where we've got this. This is the ironic thing that people fail to see is that this anti-meat crusade or whatever that we sort of associate with vegans, which probably they have a part to do with that. But the real issue is when we take meat out of the diet, it always gets replaced with processed food.
Yeah,
because you can't get enough energy out of kale and things like that. I mean, you're just not going to get, even if you're eating beans and nuts, your energy needs are going to be difficult to meet in a way that's most people can do. And so they're going to turn to the energy bar, the processed food that has, seed oils and often sugar, just to maintain their basic energy needs. And, if you look at this Eat Lancet report where, their proposed solution for worldwide, dietary recommendations, going forward is a diet where 53% of the calories come from grains, sugar, and seed oils, which is an absolute disaster. I mean, I don't think there's anybody in the diet space, well, with rare exception, that would agree that food eaten in large quantities is healthy. I don't know if you've come across people that would say, yeah, eat a bunch of grain, sugar, and oils. No one's saying that. And so why are we even considering this? It's crazy.
Yeah. So that part, I mean, there are people behind that with money interest. So that could be considered, part of the conspiracy. Who funds it, right? I don't know if you guys talked about it on the podcast. These big brands like Unilever and companies, Monsanto, and some of these Coca-Cola, like these big companies are funding this stuff. So they have their agenda. And it's very suspicious that all their ratios or their different foods that they say are allowed in the diet just kind of basically add up to processed foods.
Yeah, absolutely. So Brian, tell us a little bit about, what things you've learned as you've gone on this sort of adventure of doing a film. Because I guess I talked to Chris Bell and he says it's a journey. You don't know where you're going to end up. And so where did you think you started? And now that you've got it largely finished, how did it evolve over the last year or so?
Yeah, I did. It evolved. I started out a year and a half ago thinking that like low carb was the only way to do it, right? I kind of like, oh, this is what worked for me. And I, understood the science behind it. So I was like, everyone should be doing this. This is it. And then I kind of really tried to do that unbiased research, like I was saying, and I realized that there was more to the story. So I think a lot of people just start out with what works for them and they get really passionate about how they improve their health. But I kind of came around when I did, talk to so many people. I talked to over 100 people by now. I love to have conversations with people, interviews, podcasts, anything I can to get the story. I talk to people I don't agree with. I talked to Lane Norton. I guess you had a debate with him too. And, I kind of tried to pick his brain and challenge him on some things. I talked to Stephan Guyenet recently. I'm going to put that podcast out soon, but these kind of guys that say that, oh, it doesn't matter either way. But doing this helped me open my eyes to other sides. And even Denise Minger, if you've heard of her, she wrote a book called The Death by Food Pyramid. And she was an ex-vegan who had major health problems and kind of came around. And so she helped kind of open my eyes to, okay, well, there is other ways that can be healthy and that can work on the other side of the spectrum, right? And it's still based around nutrient density. And she eats a weird diet. So she had a problem with meat because she choked on a piece of meat and just kind of had these weird things where, you know, different events in her childhood made her not like meat. So, I mean, there's nothing you can say about that. I mean, it is what it is. So she has this different way of eating where she eats sort of fruits and vegetables and tubers. So no grains, no refined foods, no sugar, no vegetable oils. And then she eats really nutrient dense foods like liver and oysters. So that works for her, and, you know, maybe some fish and sardines. So she's getting tons of nutrients, but she's running on the high carb side. And then that kind of opened my eyes. Okay, well, there's two sides to this, right? You can go down either route. You can go down the meat heavy route and run on fat, or you could, if you're, you know, crazy like her, I don't know anyone in America that eats that kind of diet, you know, eating plant-based plus liver, but it works for her. So the people who are doing well are going away from the middle. The middle is where most of America is. There's, you know, the classic 40% carb, 40% fat, 20% protein, or even less, really. I mean, I think the average, we're at like 12% protein, which, as Ted Nyman points out, is the exact recipe for gaining weight in rodents, and I think in humans, is eating only 12% protein. So as long as we don't go just down the middle like most Americans and you pick a side, then you can be healthy. And these people are avoiding the bad things, and they're eating nutrient dense foods. So I wanted to kind of let people know that option is there, but I don't think it works well practically, because that's another part of the story is what, you know, a lot of these people like Lane Norton or Stephen Guyenet, they're like, oh, well, you know, technically carbs and fat don't matter if you equate for protein and for calories, right? And I said, okay, I don't even care. Like, I don't really care about these metabolic reward studies that much. You know what I mean? I know enough about the science to understand that, you know, protein is what we should be focused on. It has a higher thermic effect. You know, it has a higher satiety factor. And then aside, if you're getting enough protein, all right, if you want to get your fuel source from carbs, then do it. You know, Stephen Guyenet grows his own potatoes. He told me why he does it. He said, yeah, I did low carb for a while and it was great. I wasn't hungry. I felt great. I wasn't hungry. And I'm like, so why do you eat this balanced diet? He said, well, I grow my own food. You know, I grow potatoes and vegetables. I'm like, all right, good answer. So I just don't think it's practical for most people to eat this perfect diet that Denise Binger and Stephen Guyenet will eat. So in the real world, people need to be full. People need to eat what they like to eat. And if they're not, they're going to go off the rails, right? And it's not going to work for them. So yeah, basically to wrap it up, I understand why different sides can work. So if, you know, these vegans are more plant-based, you're like, oh, you guys are crazy. You guys are wrong, because look at all these people who did well on a plant-based diet. Or you know, mostly plant-based. You know, I don't think anyone can do well without some animal foods. But I'm like, okay, I get it. Yeah, I know why this works. You're not stumping me. You're not discrediting anything I'm doing. I know why both sides work. I just think that being fat adapted and choosing the more nutrient dense animal foods is a much better way to go for many reasons. So I wanted to present both sides of this story in a film, but show which I think works better. And yeah.
Hey, Brian, where do you think, having talked to a lot of people from different sides, where do you think the vegans or the plant-based movement gets things right? You know, we always talk about what their shortcomings are, and you know, arguably there are many of them, and I think they put out a lot of misinformation in my view. But what things do you think they get right when they talk about stuff?
Yeah, not much, but they do reject modern norms. That's kind of one of my things I talk about. But like I said, both sides, people who go down the carnivore route or the plant-based route, either end of the spectrum, they're rejecting a lot of these modern norms of eating a balanced diet, or you know, they're not eating sugar refined grains, vegetable oils. They're exercising, they're getting outdoors, or, you know, getting good sleep. There's so many things to health, right? So once you get down this path, a lot of these people who are focused on health, even if it's a more plant-based health, they do so many other good habits. right? So I think they're not eating at fast food. They're not just, eating processed food. So yeah, they're making so many good health decisions. It's just my thing is just add in a little bit of liver or oysters or something in your diet, and you're fine.
Yeah, where I think I see a lot of times the vegan message align a bit with kind of what we're doing over here is just like this idea that you can use food as medicine, and that should be your first approach, like rather than turning to some sort of pill or prescription or something like that to put a Band-Aid over something. Well, let's see if we can fix it through lifestyle first. So like the vegan lifestyle message, I think, can be something that is worth taking a look at, especially when you think of like how many people are neglecting that and going straight to the pharmaceutical side of things right out the gate.
Yeah. So I just want to tell people, okay, I get why so many people say they got so much health improvements from going vegan, and there's a classic, that's for the first 3 months. Wait until later, or the 5-year mark when your, B12 stores are depleted or stuff like that. So I think I want to show in the film, like, it's called Food Lies, right? And I think one of the lies is that a vegan diet is healthy or healthier than a regular diet. So it's kind of, you got to tease out why that happens. And it's because, yes, you made so many other healthy choices. So just in the long term, I just don't believe that that's the healthiest way to go.
Yeah, and we had Belinda Fetke on, and she was talking a bit about that too. How, like, when you look at like the Seventh-day Adventists and stuff, it's like there's a lot of things they're doing that would promote longevity outside of just their nutrition. So to kind of take that one pillar and focus primarily or only on that is missing the boat from a holistic side of things. Well,
and I love to use a counterpoint to that is the Mormons. Mm-hmm. So the Seventh-day Adventists love to show this Loma Linda study where they're like, oh, look at our population in Loma Linda. They're living so long. They're so healthy. Okay, well, the Mormons are another population that makes a lot of healthy decisions and focuses on family and, exercise and clean eating, but they don't have that meat restriction. So they eat meat. There's nothing against eating meat. And guess what? They live longer than the Seventh-day Adventists. So right there, your kind of whole thing falls apart. It's not the fact that you're avoiding meat.
Yeah. One thing I was going to ask too, like when you were going kind of through your process of interviewing people and taking a look at the whole like food industry, when you did talk to like vegans and vegetarians, did you talk to kind of a combination of folks who were still following a vegan diet and then folks who were and eventually stepped away due to health? And if so, like what were some of the primary reasons people decided, okay, I can't handle the vegan lifestyle. I need to bring some animal products back into things?
Yeah. I didn't get too many of those people in the film exactly. I thought it'd be a little bit confusing or trying to, look at too many anecdotal stories and, trying to like show bad cases of veganism. But I did talk, Denise Minger did tell her story of, her teeth were falling out. It's all the classic stuff that Shawn posts about that I love. These vegans that they come back around after their health deteriorates. And it's so many problems there, the diet, digestion issues, skin issues, their teeth falling out, feeling horrible, depression. I've seen these stories so many times. It's not just, like a few cases that, kind of bubble up to the top and make it out onto social media. Like, oh, this ex-vegan goes back to meat and it's this big YouTube story. It seems pretty universal based on just all the conversations I've had, just even offline, right? Not recorded, or, talking to Leah Keith about her story. And, I've talked to, many people who've done veganism right. They do it well, like Leah Keith and Denise Minger. They were deep in the game. They were doing research. They were trying, they were doing it as best you could, and it just didn't work. So I even talked to a guy, people hit me up on social media and I talked to them. There's a D1 wrestler who was fruitarian. And so this guy's like in the prime of his youth, he's like 20, years old, like wrestling, and he just saw his muscle waste away, and he had no energy. And he just hit me up like right when he was questioning this, and he's like, "Hey man, like how do you feel on the way you eat?" I'm like, I'm amazing. And he's like, "Yeah, I think I'm gonna add meat back in." And I've been talking to him a little bit, and yeah, he said he's gained a lot of muscle back just in a month of eating meat again. So yeah, maybe I haven't heard any stories of the opposite, of people like really thriving for life on a vegan diet.
Hey, Brian, one of the things I thought was kind of cool that, you know, as you're making the film, I think you took a trip to, I think it was in Japan, I can't remember,
Yeah.
just to kind of look at the culture there. And it was, you know, I mean, our sort of everyone's impression about the diet that is eaten in, you know, parts of Asia, particularly people that live long, is a diet that is, you know, rice and vegetables and a little bit of seafood. And you found out that maybe that's not exactly represented what really goes on. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Yeah. I hate all these like blue zone stuff. And, you know, this is where people live the longest. And then when you investigate farther, you realize that they're eating tons of meat, and either the author of that book, The Blue Zone, just kind of ignored that, or, you know, they're looking at different little parts of the population, even the Ansel Keys stuff that, you know, where he went to like Crete or something, and they, you know, he would study them when they were in their fasting period, and basically he didn't get a good picture of what they're actually eating. So if anyone's been to Japan lately, it seems to be meat is at the center of everything. Everywhere you look is pictures of Wagyu. All I saw was fatty steak, and it's just fatty tuna. It's called otoro. Like that they have the right idea. It's the fattier the better. And I talked to people. I interviewed a bunch of random people, and I wasn't, you know, trying to cherry pick. Oh, I'm only gonna, you know, interview like 30 people and get the 5 that agree with me. I made this video that I put out on YouTube, on the Food Lies YouTube, and that was basically the story that everyone, the same story. They're like, yeah, I love meat. What do you mean? Like maybe like in a fishing village where they eat mostly fish, but meat is highly prized, and, you know, they wish they could afford it more, and then they eat it when they can, and they had no conception of being bad. Like these people were dumbfounded when I said, "Oh, in America, people think eating meat is bad." They're like, "What?" They're just confused. So, and I think a lot of other countries would be like that. If you're not part of this anti-meat agenda that's been pushed for so long in America and in just the mainstream media, people are just very confused when you say anything but meat is amazing. So yeah.
I was just saying, it's interesting to note that Japan is the #1 importer of pork in the world. I mean, of all the pork that's produced in the world, Japan's imports more than anyone else. So that's kind of also kind of telling as to what their diet preferences might be. You know, and additionally, their meat consumption over the last decade has really dramatically risen. And guess what? Their life expectancy also has gone up. And so I think those sort of are kind of inconvenient relationships. Now, it doesn't prove anything. And, you know, I talk about this stuff, but I mean, what it does tend to do is make you question the opposite, where you say eating meat's going to shorten your life. Well, you know, here's a population that's eating more meat and they're living longer. And you can certainly go, you know, just not too far away and look at Hong Kong, where they're at the extreme, where they eat more meat than anywhere on the entire planet, and their life expectancy is longer than anyone on the planet. So these things are relationships that don't necessarily prove that meat makes you live longer, but it certainly can go a long way to dispelling the fact that it will shorten your life.
Absolutely. And I'm bringing this stuff up in the film. Part of this, there's so many things I want to touch on in the film, but I want to get the mainstream population to know this stuff. Like, we're here talking about it. We understand it. Your listeners understand it. But there's 300 million more people in America that don't understand this. And if you lay it out to them, then even in just 90 minutes, right? It's like, how much can we fit in of these great little facts? I mean, for the past year and a half, I've filled hundreds of pages of notes on these little things, like, oh, Hong Kong has the highest, you know, meat consumption. They live the longest. Like, if we just throw all this stuff at someone in the film, then I think it will go a long way to just at least changing your thoughts. Like, letting people do more research. And that's what I'm trying to do, is give people, even the people who already know all this stuff, we'll give them a piece of ammo, right? If you have a film like this, and I know other people are making them too as well. Like I support Benny Tortorich and Chris Bell and whoever else is making these films. It's awesome. And if we give people this ammo to show their friends and family, right? Even if they're like, hey, I know you're not going to go look up all the studies that I've looked up. You're not going to go listen to all the podcasts I have and read all the books, but just watch this 90-minute presentation of facts, and this should change your mind.
Now for a word from our sponsors. Hey folks, thank you for tuning in to the Human Performance Outliers podcast. We are very excited to have ButcherBox sponsoring the show. Shawn, why don't you tell us about some of your experiences?
Yeah, I mean, I've been, basically mostly just going with their custom boxes. I've been going with ribeyes and New York strip steaks. They're all grass finished, antibiotic free, hormone free. They're actually pretty decently marbled for a grass finished product. I've been enjoying it. Lately, I've been throwing it in the sous vide and then reverse searing, or then searing it up in a cast iron pan. That's been pretty darn tasty. I've enjoyed it. The consistency I found on pretty much every single steak has been very high, very good and very high. Flavor's been good, and I really enjoyed it. I think looking around at some of the other competitors and some of the other grass finished products that you might get in the store, this is actually a fair bit more economical, and so I think it's a good value, good quality, and a very enjoyable, flavorful way to get your steaks.
Awesome. Thanks, Shawn. Remember, to get your discount and free bacon, type in promo code HPO at the checkout. Now, back to the show.
Brian, one of the difficult things to do is to kind of distill down somewhat complicated and nuanced topics like the environment and stuff like that, and put it into a 10-second soundbite or a visual that people can take away. And that's one of the sort of things that I think the folks that promote this plant-based or vegan thing, they've been very effective at that. They have these powerful images of some poor animal being mistreated, which none of us support, by the way. We understand that they have to be killed for us to eat them, and it's done, in general, in the most humane way possible. But they have these very powerful visual images, and so that's very difficult to, counter that stuff. But I think the way the average person's psyche works is, those little images, those little short things really are effective, and that's why I think film can do that. Are you finding that challenging to do, or do you have some strategies to sort of really say this is just a in your face thing that's going to shock you and maybe make you change some minds?
Yeah, that's a hard one. I think they say it takes 10 times the effort, to undo the one image, bad image, or one, some of these propaganda side points, and we have to work 10 times as hard to get the message out there, because no one's on our side. There's no big, there's maybe, one commercial for beef, like beef is what for dinner. There's one little beef cattlemen's association trying to put out one commercial compared to millions of news outlets and stories and articles doing the opposite. So it's really hard. We were talking at the Meetup yesterday about, what can we do, how we can join forces. We need to get our voice out there. And concerning the film, I don't have a good answer to that. I can't, undo that image in people's minds. There's no opposite to that image of an animal being tortured, unfortunately. So the main thing I can do is talk about how that's not the case in 99% of raising animals, right? That's probably not even America, right? I think they find those images and videos from other countries where they're, have their laws are not great, or they have just sort of these bad actors, right? There's always these bad actors in any kind of industry. So the vegans will love to find the one bad situation that takes place, and then they make it seem like this is what happens everywhere. And in the film and in my life, I've visited a lot of farms, right? We're filming, so I guess the answer would be to show them what I've seen. Like I went to Joel Salatin's regenerative farm where he's using animals to improve the soil, improve the environment, that whole side of things will be shown as well, because that's kind of the conclusion at the end of the movie. It's like, okay, now we know we should be eating meat. Well, what should we do about it? I thought it was bad for the environment. Okay, so we have to show the other side. And I'm going to different farms, like this other woman, Tara, up in Canada, who does farms, homestead farming. And these people care for their animals so much. It's their livelihood. Why would they not care for them? Why would they mistreat their one commodity, their one, source of income? And it's against human nature to do that too. I don't believe this happens because what rancher or farmer just wants to torture animals? Like what normal person would do that, right? It's not really a realistic thing that this happens that much. So I want to just show even factory farms, or they're not even, call them confined feeding operations. I know you had Frank Mitloner on talking about those, right? And I want to show people that, like, these animals are doing fine, and they have a vet on premise, they're on site giving them the exact nutrition they need and making sure they're warm and making sure they're not sick. Like, there's not a huge problem with our confined feeding operations in America. It's actually really efficient.
Yeah, that's a very controversial thing to say, and there's a lot of pushback, and I get that all the time. And like I said, and I also understand that there's difference in the different species of animals. I mean, chickens are probably, in my view, not raised ideally. I think if you compare that to a cattle operation, even in a CAFO, and that's just a definition based on size. I mean, even if you have a small feedlot, and most of the feedlots in America are smaller. I mean, people don't understand that. They have under 1,000 head of cattle or something like that, or a few hundred head of cattle. And the room that those animals have, even if they go to the big ones where there's 100,000 cattle in a position, they all are required to have a certain amount of room. And it's well beyond what they ever even use. I mean, it's something like every cattle has something like 200 square feet, that they have to have, that's by law, and they don't ever use that. They end up, you see them clustered together because they like to be close to each other. They're herd animals.
Yeah.
That is a natural instinct for them to avoid predation. Now, there are some problems with, sometimes there can be too much mud depending on the weather, and there's things you can do around that, and some are better than others. But I mean, the problem we have is, like, everybody lumps everything into one category. Oh, it's a factory farm thing. I'm not going to eat that. It's awful. It's terrible for me. And you got to say, no, there's nuance to this. You got to understand what goes on with that. I don't know. Did you get up to Harris Ranch and see those guys up there up in California?
No.
Yeah, they're.
I know it's just up to 5 here. I think I should. We're still filming a little bit of stuff. Yeah. We're filming sort of the more human interest stories, like a health transformation story with a woman in LA. So, and we are editing and trying to finish this up in the next couple months. But yeah, I think that could fit in the picture, is going to that giant ranch and seeing how they do things.
Well, I mean, it's, like I said, I drive by there all the time, and I look, and I've seen it, there's people say, well, you can smell manure. I'm like, well, you got 100,000 animals. Of course, you're going to smell something. But I mean, it's, when you look, the animals are not packed in. They're walking around. They got plenty of room, but it's all through the eye of the beholder. But I think it'd be very helpful to expose more people to understand that, and to realize that we can always do things better. And that's one thing that, the industry has done over the years. I mean, they've dramatically improved, their land usage. They've dramatically cut down their water usage. They've dramatically improved the methane emissions. They've done that so far, and they're continuing to do that, and they can continue to do more. And the idea of just, we're gonna throw the baby out with the bathwater is kind of what I'm seeing here.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I'm not saying that the way we're doing things is perfect too. Exactly. I'm saying that it can be done much better. And in an ideal world, when, like you said, most operations are pretty small. I forget the statistics, but there's something like 90-something% are sort of family operations. And if we kind of improve those a little more, and, there's some regenerative ways to do things, and let's use the animals and the plants together, it's a harmonious cycle. I mean, nature isn't stupid. Like this, this is how nature works, and the animals add back to the soil while the plants only take away. So I feel like we can improve this and do even better. And then it's kind of the other countries are the ones that are really doing bad, right? So America is actually doing pretty well in our efficiency and our practices. So it's really the third world countries that are causing most of the problems. And then, you know, vegans will cherry pick those statistics and, you know, kind of overblow those.
Yeah, and that's kind of highlighted, you guys both kind of highlighted where my mind has gone the last year or so when kind of thinking about this stuff is just like when you look at the data where we have like these cattle ranches and 80% of the US herd is on pasture at any given time. So then that leaves, you know, 20% that are going to be in these feedlots at the end of their life. So even if we would come to the conclusion that there's issues with these feedlots, 'cause I don't think we're running into a whole lot of issues with people complaining about the cattle out on pasture. You drive by any of that, and they look pretty darn happy to me out there. I don't know if there's any good compelling arguments against having them just being out there outside of the belching argument, I guess, which we can get into if we want. But yeah, so then that would mean like we have this potential issue with 20%. And then, so for me, it's like even if that were the worst case scenario on that 20%, the answer isn't to just flip the whole thing over and start from scratch. The answer is let's find where these problems are and try to focus our attention and energy on those problems as opposed to sitting here and arguing about whether animals belong and, you know, as part of the environment here or part of our agricultural system or not. We're wasting our time doing that, I think.
Yeah, it's I think that's just like marketing ploys. They're sort of just, you know, they're just trying to distract us from the issues, and, you know, it's just propaganda, really. I think it's still, you know, using old statistics and thinking that animals are as bad as the transportation sector. All this stuff is just using tactics to try to just make people not eat animals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the thing we've dove into quite a bit on this podcast in the past too. Is it's like even when you look at the worst statistics from an environmental standpoint when it comes to cattle and animal agriculture, it's that transportation arm is that's the big 800-pound gorilla in the room. So again, we're kind of focusing on the wrong side of the situation when we're going to ignore transportation and just try to say, well, let's just do away with it all. Because I mean, transportation is everywhere. Transportation is part of basically every economic first world like endeavor. So to me, it's like that's the thing we need to really be putting attention into if we're going to really target human influenced environmental issues. Is like where are we going with transportation going forward?
Absolutely. Just stop distracting from the bigger issues. Or yeah, just the last point here is termites in wetlands, you know, produce more methane than cows. So it's just, why don't we focus on that? I mean, no one's trying to say, hey, let's get rid of all the wetlands or termites.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the issues is that, you know, the belief is that, you know, we don't need to eat animals, and so why do we do that? You know, because they're an option, and, you know, I think you and I and many of us would agree that it's not really optional. I think that's what, you know, if we look at how humans have always been, and arguably why we're humans, is because of we were able to obtain this high quality nutrition from animals, and clearly it's much higher quality than any other food out there, particularly with regards to, you know, protein and, you know, essential fats and just absorbability, digestibility, and, you know, the bioavailability of it. And so, you know, I mean, you know, I've got solar panels going on my house. Does that mean I can eat meat the rest of my life because I did that? I mean, where do you draw the line? How do you parse out what your environmental footprint is or your impact is? You know, and you know, here we're working remotely. We're not flying in a jet to meet each other.
Yeah.
So I mean, you know, it's kind of like, who are you to decide what my responsibility is to the environment? And, you know, if I want to eat in a way that makes me the healthiest, and we have to remember that, you know, the U.S. healthcare system, you know, produces something like 10% of our greenhouse gases. And so I'm not going to the hospital. I'm not getting sick. And people that eat like me aren't either. And so we're saving money, not only money, you know, in healthcare dollars, but we're also protecting the environment in that regard. So how do we arrange and rack and stack all these different things that go together to say, what is our impact in the world? And, I think that we try to narrow down on one topic and say that produces greenhouse gas, therefore it's bad, therefore we should get rid of it. And we're like, well, there's a lot of other considerations there. And hopefully people will start to, like I said, it's tough to make this in a 30-second commercial or a 10-second soundbite for people to understand this stuff. But hopefully, with more people listening to podcasts and everybody getting out there and sharing these messages, that we can have a difference. I certainly appreciate your efforts as a filmmaker. Hopefully, like I said, I don't know how many people will see it. Hopefully many, many, many people will see it and be impacted, and we can at least, what was it? Senator, was it George McGovern back in, was it 77? And he said, I don't have time for the science. I got to make a decision. Hence, we end up with the food pyramid. And arguably, that's been a disaster. There's people that disagree with that. But I mean, I think many of us would say that has not done us any favors. And so I think we're equally at a similar time when we're talking about, we've got a little bit of data and we don't have a lot of data, and we're making these decisions kind of blindly. And I think the unintended consequences are potentially going to be really, I think is more of the same. I think we're doubling down on the policy we went on in the 70s. I think we're going to double down on that. And we're going to see certainly no improvement in our health. I don't know if we've peaked as far as illness with regard to chronic disease. I mean, it seems like, we've got 88% of the people in the United States that are metabolically unhealthy. We've got, I don't even know what the latest obesity numbers are. They're always going up. I mean, it's ridiculous. I think something like 40% of the population is obese, and it's just. Are we happy when we have, when we're Wally, the Wally cartoon people all floating around in their own chairs, drinking our processed slop? I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think it's someone on the McGovern committee said, what's the worst that could happen? I don't know if it was him or someone. They're like, they thought that was bad. Like, let's just recommend low fat. What's the worst that could happen? And yeah, I mean, I don't think we're at the peak of how bad it can get yet. And yeah, I think that's what I said earlier. I think to combat this, or one thing we could do, is to let people know that the plant-based diet is not the healthy option. That is, to me, one of the biggest food lies. It's meat is bad. The demonization of meat has been the biggest problem I think we've ever had. Right? It all started with that. And I know you had Belinda and Gary Fetchion and a lot of people talking about that whole history of it. But I mean, that is the biggest problem. I think that was like the starting point of it all, right? If you look at it under that context, then that's kind of why we started thinking that meat was bad or saturated fat was bad, and why the hippie movement, people saying, oh, the only way to feed the planet is without animals. It just set us down this whole path, and everything has just gathered and put us where we are today. So I think the way to undo that is to let people know that the plant-based diet is not the healthier option, and that meat is good for the environment. It can be good for the environment. And so I think we need our own label, like for people who reject these modern norms and eat in a healthy way. But so the vegan, vegan, it's like they're a tribe, right? And then they have a lot of say in the media and they think they're healthy because a lot of them make a lot of healthy choices. So they are kind of healthy. But if we had, say, the carnivore people, the paleo people, the keto people, all these kind of people, if we could get together under one name, or just get a group and, study us and show that we're not getting sick. I haven't been sick in 4.5 years since I started doing this stuff. You know what I mean? If we could show, if there was some way we could identify ourselves and be studied in some way, even, use epidemiology, which is not a great thing, but it can show correlation. To say, hey, all these people are healthy.
Yeah, I think, we're looking at something like, they have this whole food plant-based diet, and it's always compared to the standard American crap diet, right? Where you could have a whole food meat-based diet, which would largely cover many of those people you're talking about. Say you've got these people that eat, at least a significant percentage of their diet comes from meat, and they don't eat the processed sugars and the grains and the seed oils. And guess what? They're just as healthy and probably more healthy than these plant-based folks. And so I think, whole food meat-based diet would cover that term, and maybe use that out there more.
We need to get it. I'm trying to call like a sapien diet or just, something. I'm trying to do the sapien movement. I just threw up a website, sapienmovement.com. I wanted to get you involved, anyone involved in this thing, and just like, hey, let's stop industrial farming practice, stop doing monocropping, eat more, nutrient dense animal foods, and yeah, see if we can get a name for our group. And yeah, I want to see how long we can live, right? No one knows. It's all theoretical, right? But I believe, and you believe, that if we're eating this way, we're going to outlive these vegans. But I just don't know how we can get that studied and get that official instead of just anecdotes.
I think 2 points. I mean, like I said, we could go back to the people in Hong Kong who eat the most meat. They live the longest. You could say they're on a whole food meat based diet, and there's some of the issue. But I also think it's a little bit problematic to say that the goal line is who has the most days on Earth. Who lives to 102 and who lives to 97. I mean, I think equally as important, we got to look at quality of life, and I think particularly, as someone in probably the second half of my life, I'm hoping it's my second third, but we'll see. But I think it's important to also look at what's going on functionally. How are you doing at 70? How are you doing at 80? Are you just decaying and falling down and breaking your hip, and and have you become a kind of a person that's dependent upon everyone else, and you can't be independent. And I think those things are every bit, and in many people's view, and mine included, more important than exactly how many days you live, because I think that's really, in my view, this long term, how long I'm going to live, it's almost a religion, because you don't know. I mean, we're never going to know. I mean, you're never going to know what you could have done that gave you 5 extra days on the planet. There's no way to run that study. I mean, you're going to live your life, you're going to enjoy it, you're going to hopefully be, you can certainly do things that you can say, look, when I'm in pain and everything hurts, that's not a good quality of life. And if you can do something that changes that, that's easy to test. But to say I'm doing something that's going to help me live longer, it's largely just it's always just going to be a guess.
Yeah. Yeah, and the term, health span, that's what's important. I shouldn't even said how long you live. Health span is the important thing. And I think one of your guests recently was talking about our ancestors, they were strong and robust until the day they died, almost, right? They didn't, they weren't in wheelchairs. They weren't, I don't care if I live to 90 if I'm, in a bed with tubes. So, I think that's huge. And it's about maintaining your muscle mass and how you feel. Your quote a long time ago, you told me a great indicator of future health is your present health, right? That's all we know. All we know is how you feel now. And if you're feeling great, that's a great sign. And I know a lot of people, since everyone knows that I'm making this film, everyone has their own opinion and everyone's trying to talk to me. I go back home to Hawaii and everyone's got their own little ideas. And, I talk to, say, an aunt or an older friend, and they're like, I know vegetarian's the way to go. I've done vegetarian my whole life. And I take a look at them and they're not looking good. They have a belly. They're, they're kind of like hobbling around. Like, I know they're not healthy. They're getting sick a lot. So it's just so hard to tell these people, because everyone just believes in their own way of doing things. It's so hard to sort of think that everything you were doing was wrong.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. I think the more you think about it in terms of kind of just, getting in tune with how you're feeling and being honest with yourself. It's like, for me, it's like the things I look at is like, where's my energy levels at throughout the course of the day? Are they consistent? Am I sleeping well at night? Am I like sleeping consistently through the night? Am I in a good mood? That sort of thing. Those are all indicators to me that my body is running optimally versus, something negative is pinging on the out or on the inside. And, I wonder sometimes about people's ability to kind of connect those dots. Cause I wouldn't say it's a short journey, but, I feel like sometimes I have a bit of a unique situation in that, I ask quite a bit of my body. And if you just look at the training I've done over the last 10 years, I've ran approximately 50,000 miles. Let's think about 5,000 miles a year. So like I notice when things aren't running well because I'm asking so much of my body to be able to continue to do that. So like for me, that's a much bigger picture, is kind of like, how am I feeling? How's my body responding versus like, what does this piece of paper tell me I should or shouldn't be doing?
Yeah, we got to look at people. People need to realize that. So I'll tell my story really quick about how I've been, in shape and athlete my whole life and thought I was doing fine, right? A lot of people think they're doing fine. Like you said, you're the extreme case and you notice more because you're asking so much, but the average person thinks they're fine. And I thought I was fine. And then I got into this sort of, low carb. I didn't know that much about it, 4 years ago, whatever, 4.5 years ago. And I was doing that, and I was in shape, but I didn't know what was around the corner. I didn't know that there was a next level out there. And I think so many people walk around not knowing what real health is. And I think you guys have talked about it a lot over your podcast probably, but it's so true, because I was eating relatively low carb, and then I just dropped those last bit of kind of processed food, some bread or like a tortilla that I'd eat like once a day. And major things happened. I had overuse injuries my whole life from the computer, from my engineering days. And within a couple months, all that inflammation and sort of, carpal tunnel type stuff went away, and I could use the computer again, and I could work out again. I lost all this fat that I didn't even know I had. I was always skinny, but I guess I was a little bit skinny fat, right? And like I dropped like 3 sizes in my board shorts. Like my board shorts wouldn't even fit anymore because all this fat around my organs, I think, went away, right? So, and I felt amazing, so much more energy. All this stuff changed. And that's why a lot of people come into this health space, because they had major problems, and then they do something and they go low carb and they feel better. And I appreciate that, but I think that it's even more compelling that someone who thought that they were in great shape could go to the next level, right? So I want to kind of get that message across to people too, because so many people in America are just doing okay, and they don't realize what they could be feeling like.
I mean, that's very true. And I think, unfortunately, the norm has become to be sick. That's the expectation. And I think a lot of people, myself included, I thought I was pretty healthy, and until you realize how much healthier you can feel, it was just like, wow, I really wasn't healthy as I thought I was. And then you'd start to walk every day, and it's like, wow, the world is now, instead of black and white, things are in color again. And it's just, it's unfortunately the problem with much of the food we eat. And, there's other things that affect health, but I mean, in regard to food, is that it's kind of slowly poisoning us. So we don't really notice, it's kind of like a slow decline, and it's so subtle, and it may take, a decade or more, or even longer for some people. But once you get off that stuff, it rapidly shows you, that certainly wasn't optimal, or, certainly isn't normal.
Yeah. And I want to tell one more story, going back a little bit to like the people who just say, oh, balanced diet, or, carbs and fat don't matter, and, Lane Norton type of mentality, is that I do some health coaching. I'm partnered with a doctor. We're trying to do some stuff like Virta, Virta Health, doing their technology to reverse type 2 diabetes. So I'm building that with my kind of tech background, and partner with a doctor here, and I do a lot of health coaching and see a lot of these patients, right? So I'm in the clinic a couple times a week talking to real people. So I'm kind of started doing it for free. I've been doing it for free for like 6 months, but I've learned so much more. I think people need to get this side of the story, that it's not just about the metabolic ward and in a textbook saying that technically you can eat fat or carbs and it doesn't matter. Like, I'm seeing this firsthand, and I know you had Dr. Trill on, who I did a podcast with recently too, where he sees the people. He was obese. He sees the people who are very obese and needs to make a change. And you can't just tell them, oh yeah, carbs and fat don't matter. Oh, just eat less. That whole thing is so bogus. The eat less, move more thing. I made my own called eat densely, move intensely, right? If you're eating nutrient dense foods, then you're going to be full. You're going to end up eating less naturally. There's so many benefits. And if you're moving intensely, don't just do endless cardio. Like, that's probably not going to help you unless you love it. I mean, if you're like Zach and you love to run, do it. I'm not saying don't do it, but I just don't think it's a great way to lose weight. So do intense, brief, intense exercise, do lift weights, do some sprinting, stuff like that. And so, yeah, basically this whole thing where people are trying to use studies when in the real world, those studies don't matter. To someone that I've worked with that's, 150 pounds overweight, I don't care about any study. I know that if they start eating some, like low carb, like power bar, those type of like fake food stuff, that's going to set them off on a path that maybe they're going to eat ice cream for a week. Or if they eat, you can't just tell them to eat like one, just limit your carbs, just have like one piece of bread. It doesn't work, right? And so actually the carnivore thing, I embrace carnivore. I myself eat carnivore adjacent. I like to eat mostly animal foods, and I'll have some like kimchi or sauerkraut and avocado, stuff like that. But carnivore really works for these people when they say, for the first time in my life, I was free of food addiction. I talked to a woman, Laura, I think you reposted her photo. She was hundreds of pounds overweight, and now she's like skinny, like a fitness model. I did a little 10-minute podcast with her, and she said, it was such a liberating experience. For the first time in my life, when I went carnivore, she's like, I did low carb, I did keto, and I'd eat a little bit of this types of foods, and it would send me off of this path, right? And I'd go off the rails and gain all the weight back. But once I went carnivore, I was finally free of this food addiction, and I finally was full. And I finally didn't even want to cheat. It was such a cool story. And I've heard this from other people too, is that I didn't want to cheat. They're like, okay, me and my husband, we're going to cheat on our anniversary. And the anniversary came and they didn't cheat. And they're like, okay, Thanksgiving, we're going to have a big meal. We'll have carbs again, whatever. It didn't happen. Christmas, they didn't do it. They just lost that interest in all those foods. So I think that's really awesome. It's a great tool. Maybe you don't have to always be carnivore. Like you say, not everyone has to do it all the time, but I'm just trying to make a point that there's stuff in the real world that's a lot different than the textbooks, and kicking like your carb addiction, sugar addiction. Even for me, I make this chocolate out of coconut oil and pure cacao. It's like very clean, kind of keto chocolate. And I haven't even eaten it. It's been in my fridge for 4 months because I just lost the taste for it. It's very interesting how this works.
Yeah, and I think just to go back to what we were talking about before too, when we were talking about Ted Naiman, and it's like he simplifies this stuff so much that I think it's cool to look at, because when you really do focus on like nutrient density, what you end up finding is that like most things that are hyper palatable with that combination of carbs and fats are also very low nutrient density. So it's this perfect storm to put your body in a position to want more, even though it's had enough from an energy standpoint. And you just don't see a lot of people that are like, well, carbs or fats, they're both about the same, eat whatever ratios you want, and you're going to end up in the same spot if you account for protein, calories. It's like you don't see those people mixing the nutrient dense, like filling carbs with the nutrient dense filling fats. Like it's always like the refined sugars and the seed oils that get mixed together, and that's going to just make it a miserable process. At least it would for me. Maybe some people can pull it off, but I think there's enough people that just wouldn't or can't that it's worth to have other options out there.
Yeah, and Ted Naiman, I've talked to so many people. I love his messaging the most, I think, out of anyone I've talked to. He's kind of the most on point, the simple, great message, good experience. And then to nutrient density, that's what I'm hanging my hat on. That's what I talk about a lot in my podcast, and just in general, and the movie we'll cover is, if you focus on nutrient density, nothing else really matters, and you're sort of by default going to be eating high fat, low carb, because the nutrient dense foods are the animal foods plus some green vegetables and some nuts and seeds and herbs, right? Like that stuff is the most nutrient dense stuff. So I don't know how anyone can argue with that, and I don't see how anyone could make a case for why I should be eating carbs, because even the whole food carbs aren't nutrient dense, right? They come with few vitamins and minerals and a lot of excess energy. Yeah. So yeah, what Ted Nyman talks about is the protein to energy ratio, stuff like that. Like there's not a case you can make. I put out a call on social media, like, tell me one person, one doctor, dietitian, tell me why I should be eating carbs, whole food carbs, right? Like, I'm tired of defending my way of eating. You tell me why I should eat a potato, right? Because I don't think there's a problem with a potato. And I know that many populations exist that, you know, rely on potatoes and they're reasonably healthy. But I don't understand why there's an argument why I should be eating them. Right? I choose to be fat adapted most of the time, and I choose to eat nutrient dense foods, and most carbohydrates don't fit into that framework.
Yeah. My other follow-up question too would be like, where do the fermented? I know you mentioned you eat kimchi. Where does that fall into the kind of role for you? Did you learn something about fermented vegetables that had you thinking this could be possibly an advantage for us?
Yeah, well, I'm really interested in the work of Weston A. Price, who, I don't know if you guys talked about on the podcast a lot, but he's a dentist in the early 1900s that traveled around the world and find all the healthiest populations ate and what they didn't eat. And what they all ate was the animal foods, and they highly prized them, and they ate them around pregnancy specifically. For 6 months, even before they became pregnant, they would be eating all the nutrient-dense animal foods and seafood and fish eggs and liver and all this stuff, because they instinctively knew how healthy they were. And none of them ate refined grains, sugars, and vegetable oils. So once I started getting into him, read the book Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, which was kind of a slog, 500-page book, but very enlightening. And yeah, so all these cultures, for all of history, they found ways to make food more nutrient dense. Also talked to Dr. Bill Schindler, who you guys should have on the show, the anthropologist and professor, and just really savvy on the human evolution and food. And basically we figured out how to make foods more nutrient dense. I mean, cooking is processing, meats made it more accessible to us, and helped us become human. With vegetables, we would ferment them. That would take away some of the anti-nutrients, right? You have Dr. Georgia Ede talking about all these anti-nutrients in plants, and to get rid of those or mitigate them, you would soak, ferment, and do other things like that to decrease anti-nutrients and increase the bioavailability of the good nutrients. And so then with grains too, Dr. Price discovered that all these cultures knew to soak beans overnight, or to sprout grains, or soak the grains so that they weren't so harmful. But the problem is today, most people are eating the grains that haven't been properly soaked and fermented. Right? No one really knows that that's the way you're supposed to properly do them, and then maybe they won't cause so many problems. So yeah, basically a Weston A. Price diet is tons of animal fat, all the grass-fed butter, raw dairy, all the animal foods, fermented vegetables, bone broth, and then they allow for sprouted grains, so properly soaked and fermented legumes and grains. So my conclusion after 4.5 years and maybe a year and a half of my very intense research, all day every day, is my kind of conclusion is that type of way of eating minus the grains and legumes is optimum, right? So if you choose to be fat adapted, I think there's many benefits of being fat adapted, and so those grains and legumes, even though maybe they are okay once you soak and ferment them, I just don't think that that's as beneficial or as optimum as just sticking to the animal foods plus the fermented vegetables. So it's kind of also a bit of hedging my bets with this whole gut microbiome argument. And everyone has their own opinion. I don't think we know enough about it to make any conclusions of, do we need to be feeding our gut bacteria or not? Or that's a whole different story that I'm not educated on enough to talk about. But I just know that I'm going to include some of these fermented foods, and they have some probiotics, and it's kind of just like, hey, I'll hedge my bets a little bit and make it, have a little sort of tasty side with my meat, and it's been working well for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is, I I don't think there's anything wrong with that strategy, quite honestly, even though like I said, I've been a carnivore diet advocate, but I'm certainly, at the end of the day, I think it's, do what ultimately works for you well. The concept that, much of the vegetation that humans have managed to eat over the years has always had to be processed in a way to make it less toxic. There's very few, I would say fruit might be the exception to that. But there's few plant foods out there that don't require some sort of detoxification process to where we can eat them. And most of the, as we know, most of the plants on the planet are just completely inedible. They're very toxic and will make us sick. So I think that is an important concept. What other question was I going to come up with, Brian? I can't remember. Brian, I'll tell you what. Let me ask you, where can people go to help you finish this film, or if they want to support your film, because I think that's important. That's an important thing for people that are listening that might want to make this come to fruition, because I know you're not completely finished, and I know it's not you're doing this on a more or less a shoestring budget, and
Yeah.
And so, I mean, let people know where they can find you, how to support the film, and other stuff that you might want to let people know about.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's foodlives.org, and you'll find the link for Indiegogo there. So the Indiegogo is still open. I'm actually about to open another Indiegogo because this whole post-production process is taking a lot more money than I thought. And yeah, I mean, I'm spending all my own money on this, my own time, I quit my job. I'm really just it's probably a really stupid idea. Luckily, I don't have kids. I'm just kind of young and reckless, and trying to make this happen on my own. But yeah, the community's been great so far. We've gotten a lot of good support from the audience, and we kind of still need that support to finish it up and make this film good. So yeah, Indiegogo, but you just go through foodlives.org, and yeah, we have these shirts. I have this shirt on right now. If anyone's watching the video version, it's what else you eat, not the meat. And it says eat meat in big letters. And, I think all the problems we have, it's from what you're eating the meat with, right? It's not the meat. It's not the thing we've been eating for all of history, right? It's everything else. So you can get that shirt and, yeah, some other stuff. We got some posters, whatever.
Wise words indeed. We'll link to the foodlies.org website in the show notes as well, so the listeners can easily click over to it and hopefully support and get that documentary up and going, because it's going to be a good one to watch, I think.
Yeah, thank you so much, and yeah, thanks for having me on and talking about this and spreading the message.
Yeah, Brian, just one other question for because there's people asking me all the time, what kind of platform will it be released on? And do you know how that's going to go out for people that want to watch it eventually?
Yeah, I noticed. I try to comment on your posts when people ask. We're trying to finish it up by the end of spring. So, and we're looking at Netflix. So I'd really love to get on Netflix because that's where the most people are. It's definitely going to go up somewhere. Yeah. So people who pre-order the film will definitely get it, and they'll get it early, and it will make it on somewhere, Amazon Prime, Hulu. I'd rather have it on Netflix. I just hear they rip you off though. I don't know if you've heard any stories, but apparently Netflix, they try to undercut you, and they think they're really cool because they're the popular kid in the room. But yeah, it'll get out there soon.
Well, good for you, Brian. Thanks for coming on. And, it's good running into you last night. Hopefully let me know if there's anything else I can do to support the film. Obviously I'm very excited about trying to get this message out there. So.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And yeah, maybe I'll post, we made another video. We made a couple videos for you. We went to Muscle Beach and we pulled through In-N-Out. That video on YouTube of you pulling through In-N-Out, it got a lot of hate. A lot of vegans found that video, and everyone has their own problem with it. And I kind of told people are like, oh yeah, like this guy's just going through fast food. That's not a good carnivore diet. And I was trying to tell people, this is just something this is when you're on the road, like it's a good option. This is not what he eats 24/7, but I'll try to put that video out again and see if we can get some more vegan hate.
Well, if they spread the word for the documentary, that's better, I guess. So
I mean, yeah, I'm getting a lot of views on that YouTube video, so it's helping. I say thank you. Sometimes I just thank vegans. People, even on Twitter, it's like you're getting my Twitter post a lot more reach, right? The algorithms are boosting my tweet because you're commenting so much on it. Thank you for this. And they get really pissed off.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks again, Brian, for coming on the show. I look forward to getting this one up to our listeners.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Human Performance Outliers podcast with hosts Dr. Shawn Baker and Zach Bitter. If you enjoyed the show, please consider following us on social media and checking out our websites. Links to those can be found in the show notes. Also, if you have any questions or comments, please do not hesitate to shoot us an email at hpopodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again for tuning into the show.